Namaste to you all. Someone had mentioned on Reddit that I should kind of check out this, I think, David Long and Non-Reductionism as a spin-off of integral theory. Obviously, anything of that nature is highly of interest to me. For whatever reason, I didn't actually contact him. I'm sure he'd love to do like a discussion or a debate or whatever. What's feeling most natural to me and what's kind of been working lately to actually get me to make videos is I'm just going to respond to a video that he put out recently talking about Ken Wilber and integral theory. It's kind of a pro and cons list. So I hope you like it, and I hope that it answers the question of like 3 people who thought that it would be cool if I responded to non-reductionism in some way.
Why non-reductionism is a better meta theory. If you enjoy this clip, consider watching the full-length video.
Just to be extremely clear, I'm of the mind that anyone thinking in this way, anyone at level 7, anyone spreading anything resembling integral theory, meta theory is wonderful. They're on my side. They're my hero. They're awesome. I support them. I feel bad for them when things don't go well. I root for them, okay? I see us as being on a side. If there are sides, I believe that the levels are the sides that there are. And so I see myself as... My Amber meme sees myself as being on the membership side of people who are at level 7, interested in level 7, trying to think, feel, and do at level 7. Wanted to just say up front, yeah, because I've read his story. I've seen a couple of his videos, and I find him very sympathetic and likable. I think he's cool, and I think he's funny, and I like his material. What I should say, I don't really know how to say this, but like... His material is rather incendiary if you're an integral theory person. It's very much a condemnation and criticism of Ken Wilber, the Ken Wilber community, and aspects of Ken Wilber's integral theory that he feels are ridiculous, actually. That's not my perspective, but he actually has been a lot more engaged. And he's been doing it a lot in terms of his actual behavior. He's been doing it a lot longer than me. Like he's been trying to participate in groups and ultimately became disillusioned with it and started his own kind of anti-integral, non-reductionism. Very interesting, very exciting, and I wish him the best in that pursuit. Now, because it's so incendiary and it's so critical of, people including me, which I don't really identify as being like a Wilber fan or whatever, but I mean, the criticism is levied at people like me, I suppose, and levied at Ken Wilber, which is kind of what I teach. So I want to be clear, I'm not like bothered by that. I think it's fantastic. I think that it's great for us to have these discussions. And I agree. Like, it seems like integral folks don't really want to do this sort of thing. And that's something we ought to question. So here I am doing it in the way that I do it. I don't think that it's very integral in nature to debate. I think it's like debating is like level 5, level 6. But this becomes a debate because like everything I have to say about what he actually puts out has this kind of like almost like vindictive character to it, like a petty, like I'm getting back at something kind of feel to it. It kind of weirds me out because the simple fact of what it is so intriguing to me. It's an alternative to integral. It's a criticism of integral. That's extremely of interest. I'm not going to use like debate bro terms or anything, but it's like a lot of what you're putting out here in your content is like straw man arguments, is like ad hominem arguments, is like debate stuff. Like it forces the debating character out of me. So please understand that as I go into this, it is my pleasure to have a discussion that resembles a debate with anyone on this topic. It's my pleasure to be supportive and encouraging of anyone pursuing these ideas, whether they agree with Wilber or disagree with Wilber, meta theories, metamodernism, integral, any of that, non-reductionism, any of that. It's great. This is the nature of the kind of people that we are at level 7 is we integrate, we appreciate the things for what they are, and we criticize the things that they're not, and we try to help them to grow and develop into the things that they ought to be according to our values. Yeah. What I'm excited for with David's work, and I hope it kind of moves more in that direction, is if we're doing the debating Wilber thing, then you'll see a lot of points here that I'd like to see kind of addressed more than the summaries of kind of negative things that it's possible to say about him and his work. I have a lot of suggestions for ways that, like, as you present this, it could appear less hostile to the hand that feeds you, like green meme and teal meme, like your audience. I assume maybe you're not shooting for them, but this is the reason, though, that frankly, I think this is the reason why Ken Wilber doesn't engage with his critics and doesn't take his critics seriously and doesn't enter discussions with them. Just from my perspective, just looking at the criticisms that are out there, a lot of them kind of have this character of really having a chip on their shoulder or an axe to grind about something like in their own life, or in their own experience of receiving this material and like coping or adjusting to it. And there's very little work that satisfies my desire for criticism of integral theory. Like, yes, if you have no knowledge of states, then that will lead you to particular conclusions of thought. And if you do have knowledge of states, that can mislead you into incorrect conclusions about thought. I mean, this is one of the primary things integral has always been designed to address. This is like the only tool that exists to deal with this problem. I mean, I'm exaggerating there. I'm really excited to move into like, okay, what's different now, because you've really made a strong point of distinguishing yourself. So now what is your difference, and what do you add, and what do you contribute to what I do, integral theory, level 7, making it real. And I hope you check out his channel. I hope you watch his videos. He knows the subject, there's no doubt about that. I feel like he makes a small effort to mislead the watcher about like integral and the movement and the history of it. But he does not say non-factual things. He just kind of curates it in a way that makes it seem highly dubious and suspicious so that his theory will seem more attractive by comparison. So fair enough.
Pros and cons. Integral theory. Pros. You have the AQAL elements. All quadrants, all levels, all lines, all states, all types. Pretty good start for a holistic approach. You have an explicit map, the whole worldview expressed in one page, one basic image, which is a good start for really being able to dig into the meta theory. Another really good thing is the fact that developmental psychology is scientific and stages are rooted in a meta-analysis of developmental psychology, at least up to a point. There's some good academic and scientific grounding and rational language. Some kind of a person who is the origin of the theory who we can point to as a person of authority. That has its issues too, but we'll get to that later.
Okay, and again, I don't like about it that anyone thinks that Ken Wilber is a founder authority. I don't think that people need to look to him. I don't think he offers us anything beyond what he's already offered us. I think that that's the very problem that you have. I don't think this is a pro of integral. It's that Ken Wilber is a very compelling and interesting person, and people want to know him, and people want to link up with him. He's a cult of personality just by virtue of, like, he's a buff genius that's really friendly and cool and, like, writes these books that are genius level. I mean, come on. Like, some people are captured by that, and I think that's a really negative aspect, and it's an unfortunate aspect of how his work is received and understood. He's sort of like a Dane Cook of philosophy.
The theory that could be reframed, such as eros and agape, maybe if they weren't concepts specifically tied to the idea that love goes all the way down and all the way back, but just masculine and feminine aspects of love, fine, great.
Why is masculine and feminine go all the way down better than love goes all the way down?
Great, good. Now, when it comes to the cons, of course, I've already mentioned, there's a bias conflationary integration that privileges Eastern religious ideas, and also the upper left quadrant and state training.
This is fair, and we need, we need the Christian Wilber and the atheist Wilber. We need these, integral thinkers that aren't coming from religious traditions but do have state experience. I hope that we see more of that in our culture, but this guy was very informed by Eastern thinking and found, Buddhism in particular to be highly effective for accessing transcendental states of consciousness. And maybe he goes a little too far in including that in his public presentation. Maybe he goes too far in focusing on it in his work. Maybe.
Back to this one problem. It's even hard to tease them all apart because they're all so interconnected. This bias ends up corrupting every element, and it also ends up breaking its own rules.
Like, corruptive suggests a nefarious or evil motive, or like a toxic or infectious nature, and I don't see that the Eastern thinking has that effect on his or Jung's work. It is central to the work that he does, and it's important in terms of comprehending what he's putting across, that he includes some sort of frame of reference for how you get to transcendental states of consciousness and how they're understood by the mind.
To integration. So you have a religious cosmology at the heart of this theory. Wilber believes in free will and souls and reincarnation. Wilber believes in...
Whoa. You included free will? Wilber believes in free will? You don't believe in free will? Okay.
Psychics.
Meta-analyses of like precognition, telepathy.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Notice how like fucking sick he looks in this video. I don't. AI Ken Wilber tried to help me sort this out, but yeah, I no psychic powers. I don't believe in them. I think that auras are real in the sense that like people who understand mathematics as colors or music as colors, people may see human beings as colors. I think that's what auras are. I do believe strongly in intuition because I've experienced sort of intuitive things. I know, I'm familiar with that world, and I think that there's a sort of intuitive nature to the psyche where things can be comprehended on a level that isn't necessarily your egoic thinking mind. But no, I completely agree with you. He's gone too far in sort of like validating precognitive people, levitators, cities. I think that these sorts of things, if you really need to make a point about them in public, you are required to make some sort of statement about the scientific validation of it. That's what everyone's going to wonder about.
Have shown almost 100% certainty that they exist. I think it's really only as those that were crazy enough to believe in it really started doing research.
In his work, you don't really find validation of specific psychic powers, but he places those phenomena in that category. Level 9, indigo, psychic realm. This is where, if anything of that nature happens, this is where it happens. I believe there was one like blog post that everyone got upset about because he said something like completely absurd about some magician. I couldn't find it, but it certainly wasn't a big deal unless you were trying to call him out for something like that, because it's not a theme that pops up very much in his work. It's something that people go hunting for.
That's why all of these psychic events of subtle paranormal phenomena were called paranormal. Normal people don't have precognition or clairvoyance.
There's a lot of woo-woo ideas in the community. Wilber ends up endorsing minority positions in the scientific community, even some creationist ideas.
Again, integral is inclusive. Like to include people and have them allowed to talk is not exactly the same thing as validating their ideas. To recognize the value of like lower levels of consciousness is not the same thing as saying these are the highest levels of consciousness.
Aurobindo is where the word integral comes from.
Multiple places, Aurobindo was one of them, yeah.
Acting like they're doing some kind of a real meta-analysis when they're mixing in the mystic Aurobindo with developmental psychology.
Integrating.
There's also a corruption of the colors, negating the dialectic that was built into it through spiral dynamics. Wilber kind of moved over to this sort of light spectrum way of talking about stages where blue is called amber and yellow is called teal. And he stacks on third tier Aurobindo state stages as if being a mystic is the highest stages of development.
The color names don't matter at all. It's whatever's most cognitively useful. I find the rainbow much simpler. I know it was hard for me to transition to it for specifically what you mentioned, like amber. Some of these names are like weird. You don't really think of a color automatically. The spiral dynamics, yeah, you're suggesting like a sort of dichotomy that exists there, this sort of back and forth thing. Yeah, sure, that could be included. I like the idea of the spectral thing and visible colors light. But these are analogies. These are not like that means nothing in terms of either of these models. What colors are used for the colors? I stress that in altitudes, but spiral dynamics also stresses that they're just arbitrary color names for the sake of simplicity, and they chose like blue is like royal blue. There's like vague associations in terms of like color theory, but they're not thought to be like constructed of some logical systemic purpose. They could be anything.
When I came across Ken Wilber, one of the reasons that I felt really comfortable being in the integral community was that Wilber suggested this idea that he called the pre-trans fallacy, or the pre-trans distinction. And he explicitly said that he was influenced by Joseph Campbell, same as me. And so he made this distinction between literal, magical, mythical ideas that are pre-rational and metaphorical ideas, poetic ideas that are trans-rational.
I would disagree with this statement. In particular, metaphorical and poetic is not really the meaning of transrational. That would be mythological. That would be pre-rational. So here you've equated transrational with pre-rational in your definition of what transrational is. We're going to go to a clip of Wilber where he will kind of explain what transrational means from his perspective.
Joseph Campbell, probably the recent era's greatest mythologer and interpretive mythology, and somebody I certainly cut my teeth on. I was a great admirer of his and a really extraordinary work that he did. He used to very, very vehemently, actually, say that there's really sort of two types of mythology, or mythology forms two different functions. He wouldn't use the terms pre-rational and transrational, but the way we're talking about them is the way he would talk about these two functions of mythology. And the first function is when mythology is taken to be concretely real. But what some people do, particularly educated, intelligent people like us that are trying to get some meaning in our lives, we can tend to take myths as deeply symbolic of something else. Campbell knew this, as if the capacity to form a cognition that says it's as if this is the case, it's transrational. It can represent a deeper self, a higher self. It can represent oneness with all of reality.
So trans being not metaphorical, but a deeper self, a higher self. So not poetic, metaphorical, which is pre-rational mythology. Transrational has to do with a redefinition of the self-sense, the moral position that you inhabit, the meaning of your life, the way you perceive and understand the nature of reality. I'm afraid this betrays kind of like what the theme is going to be kind of through this whole thing, I think, is there's this sort of straw manning of Ken Wilber that I find weird for someone who is absolutely steeped on the topic, knows what they're talking about, and if there is any kind of altering of definitions, it would stand to reason it's sort of deliberate in order to make Wilber look bad. I don't really get it. I mean, this is the platform that you're using is Wilber's theory. Like you're going to use the pre-trans fallacy to call out Wilber's kind of mystical takes on things. In order to get Wilber or Campbell here, in this case, in the way Wilber's using it, I don't speak for Campbell. I don't know Campbell that well. But in the Wilber sense, in the way he uses trans, it is not synonymous with pre at all. The only comparison is that it's not the one in the middle, you know, which, of course, you know. I mean, of course you do. The question I would like to see expanded on in this video is, what does transrational mean to you? What does postmodern mean to you? What does enlightenment mean to you? How are you defining these states of consciousness? How do those states of consciousness realized as permanent traits relate to the levels that you describe in your levels model?
Tell the difference between pre-rational myths that are taken to be concretely, literally true, and transrational myths that may represent some very high transpersonal dimensions.
High transpersonal dimensions. Wilber's position is that these are not the same thing as that mythology or that symbolic meaning you get by deriving a sort of feeling out of reading words and understanding their meaning and how it relates together. That's an inspiring feeling, but that is not the state of consciousness experienced in a transpersonal mystical state. That's cognitive epiphany. That feels good when you're an ego and you're striving for meaning and you find some meaning and you go, that feels good. And there's no recognition of the various claims of what transcendental states are in traditions or outside of traditions. There's very little acknowledgement of them as being in some other category from make-believe or placebo effect, which I relegate to the magenta stage 2 magical fantasy animism, which I don't have any problem with, but that's definitely pre-rational, pre-conventional. The trans dimension it's not a thing that has mass or takes up space. It's not really of that nature. It's phenomenological. It has to do with your comprehension of metaphysics in the present moment at any given time, or in correlation with, co-emerging with brain states of your physical chemical brain, and co-emerging with the constant dialogue, the 4 quadrants here. The 4 quadrants are all co-inspiring any sort of state. They all, and in the state, there's a dissolution of the quadrants wherein you kind of realize the quadrants are illusory. This is a defining feature of what a transcendental state is, and that's why it's so important, because in all the levels, even up to 8, level 8, level 9 even, depending, it's only beyond those levels that we transcend the distinction between self and everyone, biological organism, physical universe, this consciousness that's happening, that we realize that this thing that they're talking about in transcendental states of consciousness, in meditation, in enlightenment, has something non-linguistic, non-rational, trans-rational to do with the quadrants. All the pre-enlightened stages are enmeshed in quadrant warfare and quadrant dynamics, but at the transcendental states, we no longer see ourselves as quadrants, and that's why there's this experience of oneness, because we're all just one thing. We're one thing, I'm one thing, it's one thing, it's one thing. This is one thing. That's transcendental enlightenment, like stated in simple English, which doesn't convey it at all, and it doesn't capture it, and I'm lying about it. That's true. But that's why it's trans-rational. And so you can make the argument, well, it's not. It's pre-rational because it's not rational. That's what the Freudian's doing. That's pre-trans fallacy. That's what Ken Wilber points out as pre-trans fallacy. You're using that argumentative basis, the concept of a pre-trans fallacy that Ken Wilber has apparently derived from Joseph Campbell, and maybe goes down a great long line because it's a simple concept, right? You're using that hook to attack Wilber in saying that transcendental states are mythological, magical, pre-rational. Well, this is what Wilber's criticizing as the Freudian perspective. So, great, then there's no conflict there. You're just saying that you have this difference with Ken Wilber's integral theory, which you've divorced yourself from. So, non-reductionism has this problem with integral theory that you don't believe in transrational, if I'm understanding correctly. You don't believe that transcendental states are in a certain way superior in terms of comprehension of reality, superior to the comprehension that you have as ego. Great, that's a very ordinary position to have. That's what almost everyone in the world thinks is going on. If you get right down to it, of course, they'll claim otherwise. But if you really get down to how people live their life and why they make the choices they do, it is based on the assumption that I am this ego and I have to maximize for myself. It's first tier. So you've broken through to the second tier now, and this is the thing I don't see much. I find it uncommon, but you're really into the idea of like a stage 7, and I'm into it too. I'm absolutely into it. I'm about as close to you as anyone I've seen in terms of where I lie on the integral political spectrum. I'm very suspicious of anything conglomerated or cult of personality, any of that. And speaking for a lot of people, I don't think that I don't see this tendency towards zealotry in this movement. I mean, there's zealots in any movement, and obviously Wilber does have this tendency to generate a great deal of interest in him, as many like public figures do. There's a cult of personality there naturally. However, the people who interact with me with an interest in integral are weird people that usually don't see themselves as a member of any of this. That's the most typical thing. They're not fond of Ken Wilber. They're suspicious of him. They tend to have very different ideas about what the levels mean. If that's us, we're people who are fascinated with levels of consciousness, and you're people who are fascinated with levels of consciousness. I would say we're 100%. Like we're on the same page more than we would be with anyone else in the world. I'm just puzzled by some aspects of your presentation. That's all. I'm not criticizing. I'm just like, okay, we are this extraordinary minority who understands ourselves to be extremely useful to society and understands ourselves to be likely to not be fitting in well with extant structures, according to the thing we have in common, which is this understanding that levels exist, play an influence in our reality. We don't want to make the same mistake as Green Meme in that every single person is their own island, is their own brand, is their own contrary position to all the other positions in existence, their own special snowflake. We really, what Integral does, integrative, we all come together, we recognize the core patterns that unite us. So yeah, we're on the same page, and I'm on the same page with Ken Wilber, and I'm on the same page with metamodernism, and anybody who isn't first tier, of course, I'm on the same page with them first and foremost. And that's the reason why I would be interested in doing this, or anything of this nature, is because it's something that I'm interested and passionate about, and we share that passion and that interest. I am just sort of looking at this from the lens of like, okay, well, why am I coming down on you at all? Well, why are you coming down on Ken Wilber at all? And we're kind of in a feedback loop there. And I feel like you're going to run into that a lot as you move forward with what you're doing. People will say, well, okay, you want to do something different from him. You want to cut yourself off from him. So do so. Like, all of your founding material is the Ken Wilber material. So, I mean, just honor that and recognize that you don't care for him or his people. And they don't care for you, perhaps. That seems to be what you've conveyed. And that's okay. That's just fine. Maybe 80% of people at level 7 are the type of people that you don't like or appreciate. But don't we have at least this thing in common that should make us appear a lot less threatening to one another and should make us appear a lot more of interest to one another? Honestly, that's not what I'm seeing at Emergent Stage 7. I'm seeing a sort of like competitiveness and a desire for people to kind of firebrand their own vision out into reality. And I'm as guilty as the next guy. Maybe this is just how we do it. But I think that what a lot of us are curious and interested about most of all with why anyone would engage with my videos, probably why anyone is engaging with your videos, is they want to know how this fits into their actual real life, how they can bring these ideas into their life. And in that sense, I feel like my work, what I do, is culturally normalizing all of this stuff that Ken Wilber talks about. So that includes levels, and we're on the same page there. And in your system, you have slightly different elements of your system. That's cool. I'm down with those. But states is a big one too. And states is an important one to integral theory in general. A great cue or a prompt for you would be like, what is your personal, I suppose, relationship to states? What is your professional relationship to states? Like how does non-reductionism treat states of consciousness? Are they not higher level consciousness? Are they not trans-rational? And addressing the point Wilber's making here, are they infantile or just mysterious? You're kind of agnostic about it? Or have you experienced them and you just don't find them relevant to this discussion? Or perhaps you're convinced of the reality of them, but you just don't think it's all that important to the nature of reality to bring those into it.
Too many people take a lot of the pre-rational stuff and elevate it to trans-rational glory it just doesn't have.
From the outside, how do you know if this person's operating at a pre-rational or trans-rational level? Would it be if they were able to say, I'm going to act as if?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you ask them exactly what is it that you're doing. If they're making an empirical claim, check it empirically. On the other hand, it can be a very high kind of metaphoric and as-if interpretive tool.
The metaphorical aspect is pointing out instructions because it's transverbal, translinguistics. You can't communicate a higher stage or a higher state to someone. You can sort of osmosis it. You can sort of set and setting, like vibe on it. You can influence people a little bit. But yeah, there's no way to convey a state through words. So all these like writings of prophets and sages and such, they are pointing out instructions. They're trying to get you vibing with that state of consciousness. And thus, what you're doing is not logical in nature. It's not literal. The words said don't have the same type of meaning as words said in another context. This is also true of mythology. You're supposed to read it at a different level. But that is a pre-rational level. It appeals to your deepest archetypal emotional convictions. Rationality applies to your thinking ego mind. The trans-rational applies to consciousness itself or the subtle, the psyche.
This is a community of people who understand the difference between rationality and poetry, between the cup and the sword, and who could make these skilled distinctions. What I later found out through interactions with this community and through understanding the theory more in context is that there's actually a pre-trans fallacy at the heart of integral theory. Wilber himself, as I'm saying, believes in a Eastern creationist, literal, magical, mythical worldview, where he thinks consciousness is the ground of being, and he believes in spirit through time.
Okay, so what is the ground of being? So this is being. What's the ground of it? Consciousness? I mean, what is it? What's the ground of being? What is the ground of being? Why is that mystical? Like, why is that pre-rational? Why is that mythological? It's a passive observation about the nature of reality. The ground of it is that something's here experiencing it.
You are actually feeling a force that stretches throughout the universe and goes all the way back to the Big Bang and the ground of all being, one's truest and deepest self, infinite, unbounded, unlimited, and driven top to bottom by love. This love is fundamentally who and what you are. This love is timeless and eternal, present from the very beginning, and fundamentally continuing to drive evolution right now. An ever-present unity that has been here from the very beginning and all along, the force that moves the sun and other stars. Here, the deepest secrets of the universe show themselves.
Yeah, so that sounds pretty out there if you're not really familiar with these concepts, but it's not that out there. The fact that we have consciousness does emerge in the universe. Something in this universe made that happen. It came to be in this universe, is natural to this universe. So the idea that the Big Bang generates consciousness is not controversial. And from the transcendental state perspective, the timeless perspective, to say that it's been there from the very beginning is kind of an understatement. It's atemporal. It's prior to time. So it's been there before the very beginning of time. It's the ground of being.
It's vast emptiness, vast openness. And you experience this emptiness and openness because it's a space in which everything is arising right now. Fundamentally, it's waking up to this pure self. God is pure subject in you. Show me the face you had before your parents were born. That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing. There's something in you right now that existed prior to your parents' birth. Before the Big Bang, I am. This I amness is pure spirit and is the fundamental creatrix of everything that's arising.
And it actually shows up in relation to most of the elements in his version of meta theory. For example, he has stacked Aurobindo's state stages on top of developmental psychology, on top of spiral dynamics, and corrupted the developmental model, basically implying that these mystical religious believers are actually at the highest stages of development.
It doesn't need to be a corruption that there are 12 stages. You can use whatever stages seem relevant to you. It's not disputed that the top stages have not emerged yet in culture, in technology, so they can be considered speculative, sure. So just, you don't have to use them. Those are Ken Wilber's model of the 12 stages. I find them to be valid based on states of consciousness that emerge in these levels, and if not accounted for elsewhere, they could very well stack on top of your stage turquoise. If not, then you're in this puzzling scenario with the Wilber-Combs lattice and how do states work in relationship to levels. I would probably meet you halfway there and say that I don't think we really fully understand that yet. And as higher levels emerge, we should expect there to be surprises. I don't fundamentally see a problem if you recognize that self-culture and nature could rest upon transcendental states of consciousness and the ground of being. Those could be stages or levels that exist and do exist on a microcosmic level in our world, but that those could be kind of commonplace or mainstream, and that would be like a goal of society. But if you just want to say that you only get up to level 9, which starts to experience psychic states and sort of strange transcendental unity states of consciousness, states of oneness, just to simply say, well, I don't know, maybe it goes further than that, maybe it goes deeper than that, maybe it relates to levels in some way. I don't really see anything problematic about that. But you are faced with, as you well know, Ken Wilber's notion of the injunction of meditation. If you have not followed through with this practice for the amount of time prescribed by people who are experts at it, who claim enlightenment or within a tradition, or who are, legitimate teachers of it, then yes, your model will not include higher levels, because why would they? You don't believe in them. You don't see them to be extant. It is shocking and astounding and surprising to experience transcendental states of consciousness. It has an enormous effect on your understanding of what reality is and what the purpose of it is, which looks an awful lot like levels of consciousness. To anyone who's embracing, I see this a lot in the spiral dynamics only kind of people, the spiral dynamics crowd. If you're embracing only up to level 9, that's fine. But if you're also rejecting Ken Wilber's altitudes as higher stages, then you're left with then what you should be talking about in that rejection speech is your relationship to the idea of the injunction of meditation. Why, if this is a central topic for you, if this is what you do, if this is what you present on, you've adapted Ken Wilber's theory, you're rejecting the notion of higher states, but you're not addressing the fact that the model that he built has this built-in way of dealing with that by saying there's this injunction. Just like you can't understand level 7 teal from the first tier, it's just like not in your nature. It's like trying to get a cat to look in the mirror. You also can't understand states of consciousness from level 7. And like fully, you can kind of be open-minded to them or something, but as you start to experience them through the injunction of the meditative practice, it transforms the way you see the world in a way that can't really be done without state practice. And there's nothing inherently problematic about that. We want more teal. We love teal. Teal is great. We want strong green. We want any old teal. And higher levels, we might not even need them yet. I mean, they're not really relevant to the world yet. But this is a map of reality, trying to include all of it. That's what Wilber does. It's not targeted at pragmatism. It's not targeted at, a lot of things like getting laid, like your career. It's about the nature of reality. And so it includes these things that like some people don't know about, some people will find disagreeable. Absolutely. There's a lot of things in it like that.
Wilber kind of moved over to this sort of light spectrum way of talking about stages where blue is called amber and yellow.
Ken Wilber's first book was called The Spectrum of Consciousness. The light metaphor has been there from the very beginning. It's not his original idea either. I've seen Jungian authors talk about it, so I think it kind of goes to Jung and back into alchemy and density of mind and matter. Great chain of being.
Stacks on third tier Aurobindo state stages as if being a mystic is the highest stages of development. And there's all kinds of problems with that. Previous versions of the map were calling third tier stages psychic. And they're also saying things like construct awareness and ego awareness aren't things that happen until third tier, when really they can happen at much earlier stages like green. And so you have people who are construct aware and ego aware still in late first tier stages thinking that they're at the highest stages of development.
I mean, do you really feel like people at Green Meme are ego aware all the time? Because when we describe ego aware as a stage, it means that you fundamentally don't identify or have an affinity as the ego. You fundamentally identify as the psyche experience, the total experience of being, and the ego is something arising within you. That is something that I definitely associate with like 8, 9, 10 stages, and I don't, as far as I can tell, the first tier is utterly incapable of it.
And of course, there's a very Buddhist take on the states, where the body and the material world are.
What I hope to see here is a completely rational, science-based, no tradition at all. You explain what the states of consciousness are and how they work and how you can get to them with credibility. I'm working on that project myself. That's something that I don't know that anyone really does. How would you know about these other than through meditation, Eastern practices? Like, how would you know about these in the first place? How would you be curious about them in the first place? This is the role of integral. So that's why I don't see this as a corruption. I see it as like, the reality includes this. If you meditate, you can have transcendental states of consciousness that include psychic, subtle, and causal states, not psychic powers, but if there are psychic powers, those would exist in psychic states.
Considered gross, and the deep sleep or pure consciousness, empty consciousness like nirvikalpa samadhi are related with the causal, or like true self, things like that, as if like your true self is pure consciousness.
What else would your true self be besides pure consciousness? Like I'm not, it's like I'm not, this is turning into like me debating you or something. I'm really not trying to. It's just like being really kind of entrenched, I suppose, in spiritual thinking. I just kind of accept these things as given, that like what you really think you are a human personality? That's what you actually think is like your nature? Like, of course, your consciousness witnessing that. Like, are you kidding me? I don't know. So this is just like a ontological issue.
People who think otherwise about these things, basically saying that you aren't qualified to judge unless you yourself have had these experiences. But he'll also disqualify people who have had these experiences, who don't agree with the interpretations of those experiences. So basically, if you don't agree with him, you're wrong.
Yeah, right. So the kind of green meme argument, like you can't know anything unless you have the experience of another person. So you're applying that to meditation, the meditation injunction. You can't know what a state of consciousness is unless you have it. You can't have it unless you do some sort of practice that moves you in that direction. Not exactly the same thing, but I definitely get what you're saying.
There are people who have gotten into these states who don't agree with this translation.
This is what I'm like so curious about is like I don't see a lot of people who are advanced meditators like dissing on Ken Wilber, criticizing his work, saying he's wrong about states. I've never seen that to my knowledge. I think they're just not interested to do so. I'm sure that they do have these arguments with him, and if you go talk to them in person, they'll say like, I have this problem with him. I don't think he gets this. I certainly get that from the supposedly spiritually enlightened community. You know, they say you're wrong about this, you're wrong about, and I'm like, of course I'm wrong about this. I don't have that experience.
I don't have to do something like go to church and have a worship experience to understand why Christianity is wrong. Just like one wouldn't also have to get into a special state to know that the logic and the translation around what it means to be in that state isn't valid.
Yes, that is correct. So this is the bridge we're building with Integral is for people who will never experience those states, don't want to, aren't interested in them. We offer a model just so they can understand what they are in case they ever are interested, or just so that their map of reality includes those. But it's not, this is an argument I have with a lot of people in Integral. It doesn't really create a moral imperative for you to access these states. It's just saying those are available. This is the thing you can do.
And unfortunately, at the end of the day, a lot of the people in these spaces, including Wilber himself, kind of just use the idea of this hierarchy to feel special personally. They say that the reason they're at these high stages is because they've done work in their past lives and they...
Yeah, I mean, come on, like we're criticizing like an online community, we're criticizing like a cult of personality. You know, yes, there's going to be like toxic and superstitious people, and they're going to be people with weird, like, you know, don't hate the player, hate the game. I don't know, like, what are your fans like? My fans are probably the least toxic people I've ever experienced any sort of interaction with in my life, but they definitely have a lot of challenges, and I think a lot of us are struggling with like integrating this sort of worldview into, you know, the reality facing us. Man, I don't know how you get toxic. How would you... You're applying like toxic community to the Ken Wilber Integral community, like by comparison to what? Like other spiritual movements, other political movements, other thought movements, like...
Wait, only two things that you carry with you from life to life. And one is the repository of your virtue, and the other is the repository of your wisdom. Wisdom in Buddhism is defined in one way, your capacity to understand emptiness. And virtue is defined as your capacity to do good works, ethics. It also explains one of the most difficult things that developmental psychologists face. We have no idea why people transform. Anybody who's a parent has 3 children knows that they come with souls, and they are 80% formed. And you treat them all the same, and you've got a doctor, a bank robber, and a serial murderer. And the easiest way is to just say reincarnation. They come with this repository. If you reached turquoise in your previous lifetime, you are going to hit the ground running and get to turquoise as early as you possibly can, and then start from there. Let's say if last time in your life you got up to magic, then this time you're born, you're going to go through those stages fairly quickly without any problem, and then your challenge will be to move into mythic and rational structures.
We're one of the kooky, far-out people that are plugged in to that central drive of the cosmos.
This is some next-level elitism.
You know, you by curating these clips in this way, you make a really interesting point about how like Ken Wilber believes in reincarnation as he talks about Buddhism, and he's a Buddhist. He claims to not be a Buddhist, but you know, when he says things like that, he's expressing a Buddhist position, which I don't know whether it's mythological or not. It claims not to be, and I don't know whether it's true or not. I would say that is not included in his work or his model, and that those are his personal views that he's expressing. And yeah, I agree with you. I disagree with those statements, and I'm glad that his work is not corrupted by insisting on reincarnation or karma as a way of understanding human diversity. So yeah, it's a silly clip. You're right. I mean, that's silly looking.
Well, I'll speak to people on their level, but will they ever be able to really understand me on my level? Probably not.
Isn't that like, wouldn't you say it of level 5, level 6, level 7, level 2? I mean, isn't that true of every level? Isn't that what levels are? Like, you feel like nobody understands you unless they're at your level. This is what levels are.
Why should we care?
If you're in a dream at night and there are thousands of people starving, there are 2 ways you can stop their hunger. One is in the dream you can try to feed them all, or the second is you can wake up, and that will end their suffering immediately.
Now, you can probably understand why this is a terrible answer, because it's basically acting as if other people's suffering isn't real.
Sort of. It's more importantly, your suffering isn't real. Nothing is real in the sense that we're thinking right now. And if you wake up from the dream, you comprehend that it was just a dream. That's what he's saying. That everything that happens in this relative has a lesser claim to realityhood than what occurs in the causal. This is a real dilemma of spirituality, that you can be free of this mortal coil. You can be free of experience. These are the Buddhist noble truths, that through transcendental states you can be liberated from this sense of being imprisoned in gross reality, or subtle reality for that matter. It is understood from the transcendental state to just be a statement of fact that this is a dream that you can wake up from. This is an illusion that you can disillusion yourself from, that the quadrants are imaginary, that this is an experience of oneness had by the universe itself, or the self itself, or, us, the consciousness of the universe. The point that we're making in this analogy is that is a horrible thing that happened in the relative plane, that happened in the dream. That was a horrible thing according to the value system of that realm. But there's this superseding realm, which you can almost think of them as being like unrelated. Like, it doesn't matter to one realm what happens in the other. Just like in a dream, it doesn't really matter what happens in the dream, whether you get shot and killed or whether you eat a birthday cake. It doesn't really matter, because you wake up and, oh, this is actually what's happening. So then you get here, you're in ordinary waking life, and everything matters. Everyone's mad at you. You have to do stuff, or else problems will happen. And then you wake up from that, and you're just consciousness experiencing the fact of this person suffering, the other person suffering. And from that perspective, which you don't have right now, this is the most important thing to understand. Like, I'm not experiencing it right now, and neither are you. And this is something that you must commit to the injunction of meditation in order to be experiencing it in this present moment. It's not easy to do. It's not like I don't blame anyone for not being enlightened, particularly myself. I kind of used to. It's okay to not be enlightened, but I accept that from what I've learned, it appears to be a real phenomenon, and like there seems to be people who have this trait. Now, are they responsible for moral suffering in the relative? No, their deal is they're waking people up, and they're waking up. What happens in the relative happens in the relative. Whatever we're doing in the relative at level 7 to fix the hunger and the fighting and all that, it just stands in with no relation to the transcendental reality that the fact of your being a person interacting in the world is just a thing happening inside of the experience of being.
This is not wisdom. This is a shameful answer. And it really explains why he only writes these books. He brags about the fact that he never shows up, even though showing up is one of the 4 ways to be healthy in each quadrant. There's showing up, growing up, waking up, and cleaning up. But he doesn't show up.
You want to not only grow up and wake up and clean up, but if you want to show up for reality. I myself never attended a single integral conference, and I never got on a chat room or discussion board.
He doesn't show up in the online forums.
Showing up does not mean like punctuality. It means like integrating all 4 quadrants, like reducing your bias towards 1 quadrant or 2 quadrants, or showing up in all 4 quadrants. I'm pretty sure. Now this is funny. I mean, this is a pun. I hope that like people get that. Yeah. So this is where we're going to get into the actual like personal issues you have, that like he doesn't seem to have any interest in like his passionate, hardworking fans that aren't like affiliated with him in any way. Cool. Let's see where that goes. I've literally been in a discussion group in Seattle where Ken Wilber came and showed up in like a window or discussion. What is he talking about? He doesn't show up. He shows up for all kinds of things. Like, yeah, he doesn't show up for this integral conference he's talking about. Well, he's a very busy person. If there's no incentive, for him to do that, and everybody's having a great time, like, I don't know why he didn't show up for that. So this is a con of integral, that Ken Wilber doesn't show up, I mean, this is his personal character. Like, okay, he's a dick. Like, we're talking about the integral model here, right?
He doesn't show up at any of the integral conferences. He doesn't show up for debates. Imagine if you were the founder of a philosophical community and never showed up in any of your online forums, and there were conferences in the name of your brand of philosophy, but you made a virtue of the fact that you never show up to them. Isn't that crazy?
Is he making a virtue of it? I can't really tell. Yeah, he has no responsibility to any of us or to anyone. You know, he's an author. He writes books. People buy him. He's successful. There's people who are interested in his work. He tries to do that work. So somebody throws a conference. He doesn't show up. I don't know why he doesn't show up. Maybe he's busy. Maybe he's sick. Maybe he doesn't give a shit. Maybe he's an asshole. This is a con of integral theory, though, that like the guy who wrote it doesn't brush his teeth or something. You know, like I don't care. Like maybe he treats people like dirt. It doesn't seem like he does, but...
Who's never been in a public debate. That's crazy. I've been in lots of debates.
Why do you have to debate? Like, why are all these, like... these are cons of integral theory that this guy doesn't show up for debates, doesn't show up for conferences? Like, why is this getting tacked onto this? There's a new list, Ken Wilber's character flaws, and then... I guess make a pros and cons of his character too. Like,
there's no leadership, there's no goals, there's no big picture plan. It's a pat yourself on the back and feel special for thinking that you're at the highest stages of development type of community. It's basically turned into a Ken Wilber cult of personality. He's surrounded himself by yes men. He never debates, he never addresses his critics. And you can see in some of the videos that I've made, or the Integral World site that Frank Visser made, or a note that Ken Wilber made about his critics, the ERPI episode that's pretty well known in the integral community. There is no room for criticism. Anytime anyone criticizes or offers upgrades, there is a very cult-like response, like, who do you think you are? How dare you? How dare you question Ken Wilber? You think you're as wise as him? Even in that Wyatt Earp note,
like, okay, like, here I am. I'm a completely independent, unaffiliated person who doesn't give dick shit about Ken Wilber, or you. Like, you seem likable. I like you. But, like, you know, I don't know you. I don't know any of you guys. I'm just a free-thinking guy. And, you know, I'm open to your criticisms. I'm sitting here doing a response to it. I'm finding it fascinating. As much as, like, I have my own position to represent, this is exactly what I want to see in the world right now. I want to see people, like, picking him apart. Like, but, I mean... What I get caught on is, like, you're listing cons of integral theory, and it's like half full of personal attacks on Ken Wilber and his followers. Like, that should be a different category of things. Like, when you want to break down the theory and suggest, you know, its strengths and weaknesses as your own basis for, like, where you're moving forward from, that's one thing. But it seems like so much, so much of the criticism of Ken Wilber is this, like, conglomerated, like, I've decided that you're ineffective, you're weird, you don't deal with things correctly, and so now my problem with integral theory is all the things that you do wrong, or that your followers do wrong, or your scandals or whatever. And in any topic with any person, maybe I'm in the cult, maybe I've been brainwashed or whatever, but it's like, I just find this stuff really compelling. I'm very convinced of a lot of the ideas that Wilber puts out, and I'm very convinced that, yes, he's a very wise person. He's a very informed person. He has, like, all kinds of different intelligences that he brings to bear. Is he infallible? Absolutely not. I don't care whether he is or isn't, but, like, I'm sure that as a human being, he has a lot of character flaws, and there's a lot of problems that people have with him. And he's probably done, being a pretty powerful and influential person, he's probably done some pretty bad things to people in his life, I would assume, that they're mad about, and probably rightly so. I'm not one of these people. Great. Like, I'm on your side. Let's have less people. Let's have more people that are into Ken Wilber and less cultish about it. So I guess here we are. You and I are starting to do that.
Wilber says that when you're the Wyatt Earp of philosophy, every punk with a pea shooter wants to come and try you. The pioneer is the one with all the arrows in his back. As if anybody who criticizes is just coming for the throne. There's a bunch of smart people who learned integral theory, who read all these books, who learned as much as they could from Wilber, and this is how they get treated when they bring their critical feedback or their ideas for upgrades. They get told, sit down and shut up, who do you think you are? They don't apply these integral governance methods to be able to integrate in the best into their meta theory and continue to upgrade it. Not at all. And so integral theory has become a type of dogma. Even though he's kind of the first word on meta theory, his arrogance, calling himself the Einstein of consciousness.
Are you sure that quote came from him?
To engage. It's ultimately why meta theory will grow beyond him. And this is why I won't speak about him as a figure worthy of respect. And his policy of actively ignoring all of his critics makes me want to not acknowledge him or the integral brand.
Right. So you don't want to acknowledge Ken Wilber and the integral brand. So it's like, what is this video? What is, like, 5 of your videos on your, like, 8 video channel? This is like, I go looking for criticism of Ken Wilber that's compelling and interesting and valid and like kind of resonates with me, I suppose. And what I find is the best, like the most quoted and available criticisms of Wilber are very well addressed in the goofy letter he wrote on his blog that I don't even know if you can find anymore, where he talks about the Wyatt Earp stuff. Like that's just a goofy moment that happened. That's like a tweet someone put out, like a boomer put out a tweet is what happened there. But no, I mean, the deeper question is addressing criticism, debating, not interested in receiving new upgrades. I mean, sure, it seems like what he spends his time doing is working on new books on the integral theory and elaborating the integral theory as he's conceived it already. He's not really interested in this whole like series of debating and academic validation. He sees that as the work of other people to do, such as you and I. To say that he's like unaware of his criticism would be kind of silly. Like he's like so aware of what people write about him and the criticisms that people have. It's just that he doesn't really respond to them. And I think it's like a good question to ask, like, well, why doesn't he do that? Well, because he spends all of his time like creating new content about integral theory, meditating and doing this community work and making videos and being sick and elderly. It's quite an undertaking to move in that direction, and I hope that people do, but I don't necessarily fault him for that. It would have been a great thing if he had done more of that, or if he was capable of that. I don't know that he is. Probably what I would say is just that he doesn't work very well in that format. It's not really his style. He doesn't really debate. He kind of is an agreeable, like I would say, extraordinarily agreeable person, and if he has sort of a disagreement with someone, he kind of just like, oh, okay, that's what I'm dealing with. All right, cool. Well, let's see what we can get out of that. He's like a paragon of like level 8. That's how level 8 is.
Moving forward. In fact, I'll try not to mention them after this video. The information is out there, and this video is here. All my past videos are still available, so let's call it good enough and move forward.
I'm not trying to take a debatey tone or like a point by point, like nitpicky kind of tone. I just feel like I'm responding to that being applied to Wilber and integral, so I'm just kind of like pushing back, I guess. I'm like a devil's advocate with this stuff that I'm very familiar with, and just kind of trying to take in what these criticisms are, including ones that I don't care about, like his personality and his fans.
There's no upgrades to his theory that don't come from him. That's a problem. Again, that's why it's dogmatic. The last version of the integral map is 18 years old. There haven't been any improvements made on it since 2007. It's excessively colorful and a little bit overly simplistic. Another problem is that, in a lot of ways, integral theory kind of just ends up being a classification game. Well, this goes in this quadrant, and that goes in that quadrant. But there's no prioritization, and they even talk about just giving equal emphasis to all quadrants. But if I'm trying to solve a problem, and I get data from all of these different categories, well, what is the most important data? What data from what category trumps the other?
No, this isn't an argument against integral theory. This is just straight up integral theory. Like for any particular task, you may need to engage a particular quadrant, and you may need to find individuals who are really quadrant preferent for that particular quadrant. The integral thinker is the person who thinks in terms of all 4 quadrants. If you want to apply level 7 to a task, yes, you're factoring in all 4 quadrants. That's kind of what you do and how you approach problem solving.
Another problem is this emphasis on the upper left quadrant. It's not just embedded in the theory. There's also not really good, healthy manifestations as it relates to the other quadrants in practicality either. There's not really any action in the world, there's not a healthy community, and there are no structures or plans or goals about what we're trying to do with any of these things.
It's not a criticism of something that exists to say that something else doesn't exist. Like, is this really the nature of criticisms of Ken Wilber? Well, you made a model, but it's not good enough. This model's old and it's not good. Well, whose other model are you comparing it against? It's the only one. We made the model. Like, you're not happy with it. Okay, well, I guess we'll do better, sir.
Integral life is basically just a self-help business with some yes men talking heads who repeat things that Wilber has already said.
Yeah, they don't repeat things Wilber said all that well, but really fine people that like talk about a non-toxic community. Like the integral life community is so fun and so great to interact with.
It's redundant to even listen to him because he won't say anything new. Even though they've had a YouTube channel for something like 20 years, they have tons of guests on there, and Ken Wilber himself is on there. Their YouTube channel only has something like 20,000.
Bro, he's like a 90-year-old boomer. Like, what? Your con of integral theory is that Ken Wilber's YouTube channel is smaller.
And in the last 5 years, I think their biggest video in terms of views is just one where Ken Wilber starts wearing a wig. That one got some thousands of views, but most of their other videos only get like 500 views. My last video that I put out after taking some years off on a channel that has just under 2,000 subscribers got 1,000 views in just a couple days. Imagine if I had 20,000 subscribers.
Oh my gosh, bro, like, don't compare your success against Ken Wilber's success. Like, if you're really gonna like focus on like, he's not doing well on YouTube and I am, it's like, okay, you're also younger than him if you want to like throw that on there too. This is so, your material moves to like the petty and the personal so quickly that it feels like you really have a chip on your shoulder about it, and there's like a lot of shadow like hanging over your relationship to Integral that bleeds into your work a lot, and hopefully that can be honed into a passionate blade of justice. That's what maybe it already is. I hope so. But man, it's like you're kind of just cannibalizing your sources. It's like, okay, they don't acknowledge you. Like, they don't acknowledge anyone that you like, you approve of, and you don't think they're taking your criticism into play. But it's like, great. So moving forward from this, don't try to have a YouTube like a YouTube pissing contest with an elderly man. This isn't a trial by combat or something like that. What you're attacking in your integral theory cons should really be flaws of the model, you know? Not that his YouTube channel is fizzling and failing. Like, we both agree that Ken Wilber's been rich his entire adult, since his 25 onward, right? I mean, I don't care about any of that. I'm about the least care about that person that ever lived, which is why this is like funny to me. It sounds ridiculous for an influencer of your size to be belittling Ken Wilber as an influencer, is all I'm saying.
All of the integral groups that you're going to find online are integral in name alone. And unfortunately, in these groups, you can even find some pretty terrible ideas being spread around. Yeah. People supporting Trump, people making sexist and racist comments. And these people aren't even kicked out of the group. There's also no healthy standards for leadership or...
Like, okay, are there a bunch of people saying like racist stuff on anything related to integral theory? Like, no. There's crazy people everywhere. The integral theory, by all of its branches and non-integral, variants, I've found to be extremely genial, friendly, compromising, reasonable people. Many of them struggle with mental illness. Many of people in New Age spirituality or any sort of thought movement whatsoever will have like mental illness issues, and there's drama in any community for sure.
For a long time, the main audience for integral ideas has been postmodernists and New Agers and Buddhists. So the community is basically filled with these kinds of people. Yeah. In these communities, what you'll really find are not really people who even know meta theory. Most of them are just smart-sounding New Agers. And to the extent that they will reference meta theory, it will just be meta theory in service of some postmodern idea. Ken Wilber used to say things like, if you're hearing the sound of my voice right now, it's because you're already at these stages. Otherwise, you wouldn't be interested in this content. And he would say things like, everybody's right. All worldviews have a piece of the truth, and nobody's smart enough to be wrong all the time, to appeal to postmodernists.
It's not to appeal to postmodernists, it's because level 7 is stacked on top of level 6, and anyone who's interested in Ken Wilber is at least level 5, I would say. I mean, I'm not saying level 7. Yeah, it's hyperbolic. But if you're hearing it, you're very likely to be at that level, because why would you be interested in meta theory if you weren't at the level that comprehends and cares about meta theory? That's the definition of what level 7 is. So is it possible that there's any individual listening that isn't at that level? Of course, but they'll go away. They'll have their issues and they'll leave. Why would someone be there if they weren't interested in it?
But if you're a believer in any of these particular worldviews, you have a partial, limited, and reductionist view. So this is just selling integral ideas to green people. And why would you do that? Well, you would do that if you have a business.
Because green is the stage that needs to get up to teal. Green is a stage before the stage that he's trying to promote and advertise. So you would target green because those are the people on the fringe of moving into teal. That would be a smart business move.
All worldviews have a piece of the truth, and nobody's smart enough to be wrong all the time.
Do you understand the spiral dynamics model? This is what it's saying. everyone is right according to their level of consciousness. They're right at their level. Green meme is saying everyone's right from their own perspective, whatever it may be. That's different than saying everyone's right from their own level. So it's a hierarchical understanding of truth claims, as opposed to Flatland, that this is so core to integral theory.
Books and to sell things. Otherwise, ideally what you should do is that you should find people who are already at this level, people who are already making implicit integral distinctions, and give them a meta map.
Are Ken Wilber's books deliberately written for a green meme audience? I would say no, that they're not. They are deliberately antagonistic towards green meme. I don't know if you've clearly read all of Ken Wilber's books, right? They talk about mean green meme. They talk about how green is limited, Flatland, all the criticisms you're bringing up about green, that these are from integral theory, because nobody would know what green meme is other than through integral theory.
That's a developmentally appropriate thing to do. It's actually dangerous and unskillful to give, in particular, stages of development as an idea to people at lower levels of development, because they will use these ideas in a violent and unskillful way.
That's debatable. I don't know. That's a great question. It's definitely a moral issue of level 7. We don't know. Is it dangerous to be promoting this model to lower levels? I sure hope not. I feel like it's very healing and important to do right now, and to culturally normalize level 7. We'll see.
In particular, stages is not something that you want to teach to people in first tier. Most of the good and smart people who actually care about these ideas don't engage in the online groups, and eventually leave the community and leave integral behind. Kind of being like, yeah, it was helpful to learn some of those maps and some of those ideas, but I really don't want to be associated with the community. I'll take some of these ideas and go now. That's kind of the general way that most people engage with integral.
It's pretty normal for people to have like a passing phase where they're interested in a particular set of ideas or authors. Like, this is not at all specific to integral theory. You move on. Yeah, like it gets old. Like you get it. Okay, I get integral theory. Are you going to make that your life now? Or are you just going to, that was some shit that I read and it was interesting? That's more like, I mean, that's a reasonable way to approach any of this.
There have also been problems where...
Okay, these people featured here. Accused child molester Mark Goffney. Okay, see my iceberg video. Not you, David, but like audience. To have that be your image right there, that is like, you can see the Dr. Phil show. Accused child molester is like an extraordinary way of stating what this guy who is peripherally related to Ken Wilber and integral, what occurred in his life. I'm not a fan of him. I don't care about him. I know that he does some sort of like Judeo-Christian like practice. Don't care, not interested. He's like a member of, he was like a teacher within Ken Wilber's institutions. And there was this sort of scandal about how when he was younger, he was accused of some things. And then later on, there was like another scandal of an entirely different nature, but also of a sexual nature. Really dramatic and not very interesting to me. And I don't even really see it as being particularly like related to Ken Wilber. I mean, like, these are people that he is associated with. Top right is the great Andrew Cohen, who I love, but unfortunately he was so passionate about his spirituality that he really antagonized and sort of bullied people. And there was a whole documentary about it. I think it's called I Created a Cult or something. It's something about cults. When I mention Ken Wilber, people immediately Google search him and find like some scandals related to him, because that's what you do. You Google someone's name to find out, what are they about? And then next, like, what scandals were they involved in if they're a public figure? None in Ken Wilber's case, particularly. You could maybe claim some of them are. His community included a lot of teachers, a lot of diverse associations. It was a cross spiritual traditions. I mean, here you have like an alternative guy, a Judeo-Christian guy, and an Eastern guy. In bridging all those together, yeah, there was some bad fits. There were some very questionable things that occurred. Genpo Roshi is also brought up in this discussion a lot. What is the relevance of these like scandalous figures to say that they consider themselves like above judgment because they're at these higher levels? It would be in the purview of integral theory to address this and to work on like how we deal with people who are capable of spiritual states and capable of teaching spiritual states, but who nevertheless have character flaws and may do things that are immoral, unethical, or illegal. One of the things that was really attractive to me initially about integral theory was its calling out of gurus and saying that limiting the supreme ultimateness of enlightenment and drawing out guru abuse. That's one of the things that you really get out of reading integral theory books. To accuse Wilber of this sort of guru abuse thing, it's like this is a community that was highly plugged into that, and that's why there was so much awareness of this, because any infraction whatsoever would be like a big deal. And these are highly experimental teachers, so not surprising, like some stuff went wrong. There were some, you could call them bad apples. I don't care whether they're bad apples or not. They're not really relevant to me, except Andrew Cohen. I'm very curious about Andrew Cohen. I think he's amazing. And probably a fuck up, too. He's probably a fuck up. And he seems to be suffering for that. So
where Wilber ends up endorsing gurus or spiritual teachers that have alleged abuse.
I mean, here's what I'm saying is like assemble a big group of good spiritual teachers, 80 people, world class, known names. You're probably going to get some criminals in there, sociopaths. It's just how it is. Like, it's unfortunate. Like, this is something Integral really needs to sort out. It's a problem that Integral acknowledges, particularly Ken Wilber.
Alleged PDF files who have sexual allegations against them. Don't at me.
I mean, you know the story, and like, okay, call them that if you want. Yeah, all right.
You can look it up. It's all very much on the record. All in all, Integral is a pretty embarrassing thing to be associated with.
I disagree with that. That's a highly subjective thing. I think that when it's such a strange way of seeing the world, and I personally think that it's so kind of like cutting edge and emergent and novel. It's not surprising if you understand levels that the next level will be fought against by the previous level. So level 7, here we're talking about level 7. Like, it can be alienating. People can make you feel like you should be embarrassed for being interested in this, or for being a fanboy of Wilber, if that's what you are. I disagree with that strongly, and all I can say is I have nothing but the utmost respect for anybody who's interested in meta theory or integral or Ken Wilber or me or David or anyone. I think that it shows an outstanding ability to see beyond the constraints of cultural conditioning, and that's the thing that I really, really value, and I think everyone at level 7 really, really values that.
And offshoot movements like metamodernism and now non-reductionism, who want to secularize and distance themselves from the Integral brand, and associations with Ken Wilber and this community. It seems to me that Integral is fizzling and failing.
That's great, and I support that, and I hope some of us, one of us, all of us can accomplish that. That's one thing I certainly agree with you. It needs to be disconnected from Wilber. It needs to be disconnected, and I hope that he feels the same way too. Like, this shouldn't just be a him thing. Like he's the thinker. He made books about this. He came up with the idea, and then it becomes the job of the second tier to go out there into the world and make this our world, make this the jobs that we have. For people at level 7, you can engage with. You can be considered a culturally normal person and be at level 7, and you won't be considered a crazy person, for one thing, which I feel like you still are in this time, even though it's getting better. Like, people are acknowledging meditative states and things like that a lot more in this time. I don't find any of the things you're talking about embarrassing, and I don't find integral theory embarrassing. I think it's a thing that people should be proud of. So I'm supporting, I support this project, like, moving away from attacking fans of Ken Wilber, right?
One of the big criticisms of Ken Wilber when he came out with Integral was that he didn't come up with any of those things, that he was just taking a bunch of other people's work and packaging it together and selling it as his own.
I don't think that the fact that he's lifted all of ideas is even that, like, I don't think people really realize that until they're pretty deep into his work, like that it's all an integration of ideas that already exist. It looks pretty novel when you first get into it.
From Integral Yoga and Aurobindo, and that's where also the state stages and the words gross, subtle, causal, and non-dual as it relates to states comes from.
Sort of. I mean, to claim that the states are coming from Aurobindo is to, like, ignore the fact that they're coming from, I don't know, hundreds of sources that kind of corroborate Aurobindo. And he's chosen Aurobindo's model because Aurobindo built a model that he liked and found to be, like, he's kind of curated that one above others. What integral theory tries to point out is that there's so much agreement between different different alternative teachers as well as traditional teachers over kind of what the general structure of the Enlightenment process is. So it's not just this guy. It's not like he took that guy's idea and that's his idea now. It's like he saw that all these ideas had overlap, just as Aurobindo did, and tried to make a system that included them all, which would be an integral theory.
The stages are generally taken from spiral dynamics and the work of Claire Graves and Don Beck. The lines of development come from developmental psychology.
In Wilber's early work, he had this spectrum of consciousness concept, which was like a progression of levels. And so he had this levels concept. He was aware of other people coming up with levels concepts. And so he collaborated with them in kind of popularizing their ideas while also modifying them with his own ideas. So it's not like he just grabbed a theory out from nowhere and said, this is mine. It's like he was like, oh, there's levels of consciousness. I recognize like 5 of them. And then he started looking for levels of consciousness and he goes, oh, okay, there's a lot of different models of levels of consciousness. This is my favorite one. It has 8 levels. Wilber's work is very explicitly a synthesis and integration of ideas that exist in philosophy and in the world and in popular thinking. It does not claim to be original. It is a synthesis. A synthesis can be debated, whether if you play an old song and then rap over it, is that a new song or is that ripping off someone's old song? So to integrate all of thinking into a comprehensive model of reality, is that ripping people off? If you include everyone, you kind of have to rip everyone off.
And obviously types already existed. The only thing that Wilber really contributed in this mix is the idea of quadrants.
And you could argue he didn't contribute that as well, but I don't know about this point in general. You could say he came up with none of them. You could say he came up with all of them. What he did was he created a map of reality where those are the 5 elements of it. That is an original idea.
Earlier in this video, we already talked about how divisions of 4 already existed, and basically we're just applying something like yin and yang to ontology.
And it's not a flaw of the system that it includes Taoist thought into itself.
I think you could say that quadrants is basically divisions of 4 applied to ontology. And this tool wasn't invented by Ken Wilber. Other people have used it in the past, like Carl Jung used it to come up with MBTI types, and the different mental functions are basically quadrants within quadrants. Basically, divisions of 4 is just yin and yang. You have duality, which is a unity, and even within that duality, there are these little dots. So if you take that and you twist it, then you have individuals and collectives, interiors and exteriors, as it would relate to ontology.
So what's cool is I had a meditative vision wherein I realized that the Tao is that whole thing you just described there, and I actually described it in one of my videos too, but it came to me as sort of a revelation, not anything that I guess we both just kind of figured that out on our own. I don't know if Wilber actually talks explicitly about that. I don't recall he ever did. Maybe he did. But yeah, it's this divisions of 4 thing. See, this is what's so interesting. We're both aware of integral theory. I've made that very same point.
Yeah, we can give him at least partial credit for that. Did Wilber come up with the pre-trans fallacy? Well, kinda.
No, he did. The things that he includes in his model are not the things that he contributes to thinking. The fact that it is a model of the totality of reality that includes very specific, discrete elements is what he contributes to thinking. If you then go into what each of those elements are, he deserves no credit for any of them because his job, as he explicitly states, is integrating, synthesizing ideas.
He is basically saying the same thing as Joseph Campbell, and he doesn't really follow that rule himself. So what's really the value of coming up with a distinction if you don't also apply it yourself? And he often does confuse and conflate pre-trans rational and pre-trans egoic. Some people have also suggested that it might be better to call trans-rational post-formal because there's a lot of confusion in the community about what trans-rational even means. A lot of people will use the word trans-rational while they're committing pre-trans fallacy number 2.
It's I don't really know what you think trans-rational is. That you keep bringing up that Ken Wilber commits this pre-trans fallacy, but okay, I guess I get what you're saying, that the Buddhist way of thinking is a mythology in terms of how you're thinking about it. Okay, great. So, but you do acknowledge the existence of the transrational. So I'm assuming you're just calling postmodernism transrational. I don't really know. Multiple forms of rationality, right? That you're accounting for different ways people could be rational but influenced by a bias or perspective. That would be level 6. So is that transrational in your what is trans to you? What are these states of consciousness? What do they reveal, and how does that differ from what Ken Wilber describes in terms of his supposedly Buddhist lens?
The Wilber-Combs matrix. Yeah, that's good. Understanding the relationship between states and stages, I think that's pretty helpful.
If you agree with the Wilber-Combs lattice, like, what do you think? What I'd love to see out of you, maybe you've done it, but I'm just sitting here like digesting your material. I would like to see like front and center, like, what is a psychic state to you? What is a subtle state to you? What is a causal state to you? What is a non-dual state to you? What are states of consciousness? What is transcendence? What does that mean to you? And of course, how does that differ from what Ken Wilber's presenting? Like, it seems to me like you don't really believe in causal states and subtle states, like, or that there's some great misunderstanding here that Wilber has. So what I would need just to even understand your position is like, what is your replacement for the states of consciousness as described by Ken Wilber, since states is included in your model and you approve of the Wilber-Combs lattice?
So I'm sure some people who are watching this are going to have some kind of criticism of these pros and cons lists.
Nope, I didn't have any criticism at all.
That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing. There's something in you right now that existed prior to your parents' birth. Before the Big Bang, I am.
It's not a symbolic thing.
This I amness is pure spirit and is the fundamental creatrix of everything that's arising. Pure awareness, pure self, your true self, is the space in which all of this is arising.
And it actually shows up in relation to most of the elements in his version of meta theory, basically implying that these mystical religious believers are actually at the highest stages of development.
He doesn't define them as religious believers. Religious believers are amber level. This is transrational. You can say that doesn't exist, but then you have to address the distinction between transrational and pre-rational.
Who are at higher stages of development are able to get there because of virtues from their past life.
This is not included in his model. This is because you include yourself in a tradition in order to make it through the developmental stage practice of meditation, stages of consciousness to get to a certain point. There's really not a lot of great ways to do that outside of traditional practices and beliefs, which may come with mythology. Yes, absolutely. Past lives, I don't know. You don't know. Wilber probably doesn't know. I don't think really anyone knows about that. So I would go with you in saying, like, I reject that until I know better. But I reject it given that I don't know better, that there might be people in the world who know about that and I don't know about that. But I'm happy to reject it from level 7. What I'm finding this disingenuous to kind of like to pretend that Ken Wilber's integral theory and his books have a lot of content where Ken Wilber is explicitly saying, like, there is reincarnation, there are past lives, karma is this thing that transcends life. And in fact, when I read his books, what I see is the student asks the master, what happens after we die? And the master says, I don't know. And the student says, but you're a master. And the master says, but not a dead one. Right. So he tells that joke a lot, and in his work a lot, he says, like, I have my understanding of this, but I don't expect people to really buy into it. It is kind of stuff that it's not really necessary to include it in his actual work. To draw reference to Aurobindo, because Aurobindo was so profoundly influential to his thinking and what caused him to create these models. It's not like Ken Wilber was not involved in any way with the development and popularization of developmental psychology in general, but definitely specifically spiral dynamics. He's like the reason why anyone such as you and I would know about it, unless we like stumbled onto it in some weird way. But it was never used in the way that Wilber uses it prior to Wilber. The Graves stuff and Beck and Cohen, they don't really see it the way that he sees it. I don't really see what the corruption of the model is to have stages on it that you don't know about and are familiar with. I feel like you're asking the first tier to do the same thing. You're trying to, I am anyways, trying to popularize a model of 8 to 9 maybe stages of consciousness and say, well, you're at level 5, level 6, so you don't understand the existence of the higher stages. I actually think it's quite an insulating layer to say, I'm at level 7, level 8, and there's actually 12. I'm right in the middle of this thing. I mean, I'm in here with you in the developmental spectrum. I kind of like that idea. It doesn't bother me that there might be people in the world existing with a greater comprehension of reality than me. That seems likely. That seems most probably the case. if Wilbur's wrong, then he's wrong, and I would love to see criticisms of specifically like how stages after 9 would differ from the ones he presents, or how there's a cap on stages that makes it impossible that his stages are the correct ones, or that there's really any reason to speculate on it whatsoever if you don't care about transcendental states of consciousness and you see all of religious thought and spiritual thinking as being of a mythological, pre-rational type. This is not... Level 7 isn't like that. Teal isn't like that. Teal is open to transcendental states of consciousness because they appear to be phenomenologically real. Certainly from my perspective, they are real. I could be mentally insane, but no, I couldn't. But I could be lying, is what I could be doing. So I would be lying because orange meme, red meme, amber meme reasons, not second-tier reasons. So I generally don't lie about things like that. I think it's very important for me to be truthful with my audience about like where I'm at in terms of the topics that I talk about.
Spiral dynamics is actually more in line with dialectical materialism, which, by the way, is a very different thing from reductionist materialism or empirical reductionism. Obviously, ontologically, we take into account all 4 quadrants. It's just that we don't think that the interior quadrants go all the way down and back. We know from science that consciousness is a later historical emergent, and subjectivity is an epiphenomenon of...
It's a chicken and an egg thing. Where consciousness comes out of nowhere. It's like magic. I mean, I get what you're saying, and this is clearly a problem that a person's going to have if they're really serious and deeply looking at Ken Wilber's work. The notion of interiority going all the way down through all the levels. Well, where do you draw the line? Does a plant have interiority? Does a cell have interiority? Does a virus have interiority? What about a protein strand? Okay, now we can say, what about a grain of dust? Does it have some sort of greater interiority than nothing whatsoever? Is it a piece of data existing in the information universe? Interesting to think about and challenging to our contemporary perspective. We materialists generally understand the universe to be like a closed system and nothing comes out of nowhere. Everything has a cause. So if life comes from not life, consciousness comes from not consciousness, we have a sort of problem of why does that happen? How does that happen? Obviously, this is just history of philosophy stuff that we're all familiar with. And the integral answer is that it's this evolutionary process that sort of is the nature of reality, that it is an evolutionary process that seems, from our apparent perspective, to be going in the direction of less consciousness to more consciousness, less complexity to more complexity, holons. I know that there are claims coming from yoga traditions and stuff of a sort of interiority, like a sort of soul inside of matter or in plants, that is a lot more similar to a magical animistic belief. It's a lot more to attribute human personality and agency to material objects. But this is not really what we're doing when we're suggesting interiority at lower levels. It's simply a matter of saying, if everything exists in 4 quadrants and we see the development, consciousness emerges at the level of mind, life emerges at the level of life, and the levels go down, we can use the word interiority to capture whatever the interior existence is of things beneath the life level, where what's happening in there, we don't register it as consciousness. We don't call it that word. That's why they're using the word interiority. It's not consciousness. The word sentient would be problematic here too, and I'm guessing that they use that word.
We know from science that consciousness is a later historical emergent, and subjectivity is an epiphenomenon of the brain.
Consciousness and subjectivity, I don't think, are the interiority we're speaking of when we talk about pre-life levels.
Also a problem with an overemphasis on state training, and even the states themselves are framed in terms of a Buddhist worldview. Like the waking state is called gross, and the deep sleep state is called causal. So the idea here being that consciousness is more fundamental and...
Sort of, the deep sleep state is not the causal state unless you're experiencing a causal state while in a deep sleep state. The causal state, you must be awake and alert and aware during the deep sleep state, which is a very strange thing, and it's very uncommon. And therein, the why it's called causal makes a lot more sense, because from the ground of being, you see the objects of your phenomenological reality come to be from the ground of being, arising as subtle phenomena, creating the reality around you. That's sort of how the causal is experienced or perhaps described. The causal realm is the realm that you're in a deep sleep state, and the causal relates to the deep sleep state. But I don't think it's fair to call what we do when we are in a deep sleep state deeply unconscious of anything. I don't think that is what we mean by like a causal state, a transcendental causal state of consciousness. We're unconscious of being in the causal realm. We're not aware of being in the causal realm. And then as we wake up and persist throughout our ordinary life, we're also not aware of being in the causal realm, which is the ground of being, witnessing consciousness, seeing the phenomena arise from yourself as something that you can see and operate upon and understand and witness.
Just the base level, the gross level of things that if you really see.
And gross is like a gross of product, base. It doesn't mean like disgusting, right?
Past it, you'll get more to like the causal, more fundamental, more real things, which are this pure consciousness and stuff. So basically what I'm saying is every element of integral theory has been corrupted by literal fundamentalist religious belief of the Eastern variety.
Integral theory is a synthesis of Eastern and Western thinking. So it's not corrupted by it. This is the nature of what the theory is. It includes all ways of seeing reality. If you want a more reductionistic theory that doesn't include Eastern thinking, then you've got it. Like spiral dynamics, is great. But that's what integral theory is. It's a synthesis of all existing viewpoints into one coherent framework.
About 10 years ago, I started making some of my first integral videos. And at the time, I was teaching lots of people integral theory. Even then, I was teaching a fixed or improved, more healthy version of integral theory. And really wishing there was something I could point them to. I was giving the same lessons to individuals over and over again. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to make some videos about some of this stuff. And I was largely motivated by the fact that there wasn't really any good intro material. All the intro material was kept behind a paywall. And even then,
that's why I'm making it.
Really very good. The Integral Life website was basically just a bunch of famous people talking to Ken Wilber and being convinced of integral ideas.
I got Integral Naked was awesome. I loved it so much. Hearing celebrities like have actually deep discussions that were not debates or like conflict. Those were beautiful discussions, and you got to see a side of famous people that like was something I had never seen elsewhere. I listened to probably 80% of Integral Naked.
There wasn't really good intro material.
Man, you're kind of right, but like this is a thing that you can only be interested in if you're relatively advanced cognitively. It's a thing for nerds. It's not for everyone. According to the model, first tier isn't going to be interested in it particularly unless you make it appeal to first tier according to first tier values.
And I introduced my own Davidian integral map. It included some upgrades in relation to quadratic primacy. It had a focus on emergentism, and we took away the mystical corruption in the stages of development.
Do you really need to call it the word corruption? I mean, really?
Which is one of the reasons why Don Beck really liked me and wanted to work with me, because he thought I was going to restore integrity in the meta-theory community to spiral dynamics, his life work. And he challenged Wilber to a debate and said that he didn't think that Wilber would ever debate him because he just hides out in his loft in Denver and avoids all of his critics.
Yeah, I mean, air quotes on hides out, right? I mean, what does that mean? Well, it's not really of interest for Ken Wilber because he's like did quite well in his career and didn't really lose much by any of the rejection of the people that he'd worked with. Do you want to debate someone that you rejected their model and they rejected your model, like, and your model it sells more books? I don't know. It sounds to me kind of petty, like in terms of just like what you described. I'm having a lot of problems with KW. Like, what is this, a support group for like people who've been hurt by Ken Wilber? Like, just forget about Ken Wilber. Just who cares who he is, what he's doing? Like, who cares? Like, he made these books. You have gotten something out of them, and I would like to call that integral still. even if like you don't like him or he like hurts everyone's feelings. Okay, no, but let's actually get to what you actually said. You're in line with Beck, who of course, like makes the 7-stage model, 8-stage model, and then they hook up with Wilber and they start talking about higher stages, and then when it falls apart, they vehemently reject Wilber's contribution to it and go back to what they did before because they're at level 7. They see the world as being a stack up to level 7 and perhaps higher, but who knows what's up there. Great. I mean, there's no real problem with anybody who doesn't care to acknowledge like views that aren't level 7 within the integral movement. I'm saying, like, I still consider we're all integral people, and I find whatever went down between like Beck and Wilber in real life, who cares? I don't care. It's like drama stuff. It's business stuff. If altitudes disappeared and spiral dynamics was all there was, like I would absolutely be teaching spiral dynamics. I'd be all about it. But I just prefer altitudes. I think it's more comprehensive and inclusive.
Literally every public debate that has happened in the integral community has included me. One time I even debated 2 integral professors at once.
I mean, isn't that kind of telling? Like, because integral people like don't really debate. Debating is like a level 5 and level 6 activity by and large. I mean, what do you debate about in integral theory? It's the same thing as like criticisms of Wilber's work. You generally use Wilber's work against himself because it's a meta theory of reality. Like when you make like specific examples, it's like, is this amber meme or is it not amber meme? Well, that's subjective. Yes, it is. It's defined as subjective. Okay, so does this have no value at all? No, obviously we all agree that it has a bunch of value. So okay, but then it's just a meta theory of reality. Yeah, that's all it is. I guess not to put too fine a point on it, there's definitely moments in your work, in your presentations, where I feel like integral theory and the history of the stuff like better than I do. Like this work well enough not to make like some of the conclusions you make in the interest of slighting the theory. Like you'll bring up a criticism that has been addressed without bringing up how that criticism is addressed within the work itself. And then it's almost like you'll then pose your solution, which is the solution offered by integral theory. Just the most prevalent example in the material is you're accusing Ken Wilber of the pre-trans fallacy, which is like a concept he more or less coined or popularized. The point being, like, nobody in the world would say pre-trans fallacy unless they were like familiar with Ken Wilber's work. When you're accusing him of that, it's as if you hadn't read all the passages where he like defines what transrationality is, and that you don't have like really a specific disagreement to that. Like your presentation reflects a familiarity with the negative aspects of the work that isn't mirrored by a familiarity with the positive aspects of the work. But maybe it like legitimately you just have that focus. It's like you read everything through the lens of like, okay, well, I don't believe in states, so obviously this is going to be wrong. And okay, I get what the pre-trans fallacy is now, so Wilber's committing it with the states. To claim that he endorses like psychic powers, I've really tried to like nail him down on that, and it's a criticism you could bring up because it is a common criticism and it's a thing that people would be very concerned about. You can find places where he pushes it pretty hard, I would agree. But I think all he's saying with that is that if psychic powers exist, they would be in the psychic state realm, and leave it then. It's an inclusive model. Leave it for people to dicker over whether, X paranormal thing is real or not. That it's just in the model, it would fit that psychic space if it exists. I mean, a lot of what the model is sort of placeholder containers for the unknown to any individual. So if you can levitate, that's unknown to me, certainly unknown to me, unknown to Orange Meme. And if people can do that, it exists in the psychic state realm, probably around like level 9 or 10. I strongly believe that we would have found scientific evidence for it, and that there is no claim in mysticism that invalidates that. But other people have different opinions about that. And we're post-Green Meme, so we can deal with that. If this is a thing that people like or want more of, I could make an effort to actually contact him and see if he could, appear. Or I could just do more of these or whatever. It would be really cool, David, if you're watching this, if you, respond to me, maybe we can actually, I don't know, maybe this is a waste of your time, but maybe it would be fun to debate like real, or just have discussions with like real people out there that are interested in you and that aren't like shitty and, you know, already have their like power structure sorted out to disinclude you. I don't care about that. Like, honestly, like I've just never been really interested in being a part of anything like that. So it doesn't bother me. I mean, I'm not anyone, and I don't, you know, if you want to make like a chart of how few views I get, I suppose that's a valid point, and like how shitty of a job I do on my production and everything. But you probably don't know my channel that well. What I do is I just came here to be honest with the world and tell it how I really think and feel about everything, because I found I had difficulty with that before, and the more that I do it, the more positive things occur in my life from my perspective. That's actually what I'm doing, and in order to do that, it made me teach integral theory. Like, this is what I think and feel in my life, so I teach integral theory on my YouTube channel, and that's what it is to me. And this might be of interest too, you know, when you watch anything, you know, what do these people want? What are they after? Like, what is this video supposed to do? What's my CTA here, you know? I'm an ordinary old YouTuber. I have time, and I'm passionate about being in front of people, being honest. That's that's my interest here, and it kind of turned into this thing where I teach integral theory because it seems like I'm good at that, and people are responding to it. But in your case, in David's case, in your case, it's a lot more like you're moving in like a business direction. This is a brand, and this is something that you want to organize and market in that sense, you know. And I have nothing but encouragement and respect for that. I think that's amazing. I'm less interested in that dimension, you know, in my own work. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, I frame a lot of the stuff that you're saying in terms of your desire to differentiate your product from competitors. And in terms of my existence here, at this point, I don't really consider myself in that sense, or what I do to be like of any interest in a commercial sense. A lot of how I'm in a frame, like what I'm seeing when I watch your videos, is it seems like a lot of it is based around this assumption that it's very important for you to get the interest of people who are interested in Wilber, but then immediately point out all the like flaws and errors of his system. But it's like, I don't think that's a very good strategy, because people who are really into integral are really into integral, and people who aren't into integral won't be interested in ideas that are like integral. And this isn't a nitpick at all. It's like, what I'm saying is that I essentially kind of find the model and Ken Wilber's work agreeable. And so, to wit, level 7 teal, second tier, is probably the next stage we're seeing in the world here emerging. And it's important for those people to network together in flexing, flowing systems of mutual benefit that will nourish the health of lower levels and higher levels alike. I see that as the integral developer level 7's mission. And so that's my mission, and I hope that that's your mission as well. So it troubles me that a lot of the integral I engage with is of this like exclusionary, the desire is to differentiate oneself from other people that may consider themselves, you know, meta theorists, and to cut down like other people doing that kind of work. I feel the urge myself, you know, we're all green meme. If we're level 7, we're also level 6. So we all have that like criticism and the desire to differentiate ourselves from absolutely everything so that we're a unique snowflake. What you're really, here's like an actual point. I think that what you're really neglecting in your material is the things you have in common with integral and Ken Wilber and the movement. I think that is the weak point of your presentation, is you're then relying so heavily on it that I think that you're kind of cutting your foot off before you go for a run. What's the metaphor that relates to that? I don't know. Maybe what I'm doing at like a really preliminary level is kind of inviting us into the public space to have these discussions with people who want to participate in them. I've been pretty disillusioned with trying to do that myself, and I don't consider that a part of Wilber or his community. I see that as an aspect of humanity, that like this is a new emergent thing, and a lot of us are uncomfortable entering into this space, and a lot of us are embarrassed about our interest in this topic, as we would be. I mean, there would be nothing more pleasing for me than if we could all kind of sync together and create communities of dialogues of this nature where we discuss the relative merits of integral theory. I think that would be like a really great outcome for everyone out here who's like making YouTube channels about integral theory. And I think that we all feel that drive to criticize one another for our strengths and weaknesses. I certainly feel it myself. what I think that we should all do, guided by that level 7 morality, among others, we have that level 7 morality, which we should really be trying to nurture the health of the entire spiral, which should include our own community success, community health. How do we address these issues with the integral community? How can we offer pathways towards superior versions of meta theories? Great questions. That's my main point. Great questions. Let's ask these questions together. And anyone else, if you want to engage with me in this way, I don't always show up, I'm just doing my best out here, so I'm not always capable of showing up for everything, just like Wilber. I hope, though, that we can open up the space a lot more to having discussions in the integral theory or meta theory space that aren't circle jerky. And I think that's one thing you and I will agree on quite a bit, is like a lot of these integral theory discussions, they should be inclusive, open-minded, and agreeable, but they shouldn't be placating. I don't think Wilber's placating, but I do think that that's a common theme in this community, either for people to be too isolating or too placating. So I very much encourage and welcome and invite this critical view into the space, but understand that criticism breeds criticism, and we don't want this to necessarily devolve into orange meme spaces, but the criticisms you raise are valid, so they should be addressed by someone. And if nobody from Integral is answering your concerns, I'll do my best, and it's my pleasure. And I apologize that it's not more than that. It really should be. You deserve more. So I love you all dearly, and I wish I could show up more of the time for everyone and everything. I'm feeling good in my heart, and I hope you are too. And I hope you wake up every single day and go, yeah! Oh, Cody. So I'll see you next time, everyone. And namaste as always. And enjoy your inner peace together.